You've scripted your video, sourced footage, and recorded voiceover. Now it's time to start editing your video essay. Unfortunately, teaching you the mechanics of editing, how to actually operate whatever editing application you use, is kind of beyond the scope of a video of this length. But if you're just starting to learn, you're in luck. A video essay is a pretty simple starter project. You have two main elements, your voiceover and the footage from the films you're discussing. The point of the editing process is to bring those together to make a final product, your video essay. To show you how to do that, I'm going to walk you through the making of a recent video essay of mine. Here's how I usually approach it. First, I create a project and bring in the voiceover and film footage. I've put both into folders. It always helps to be organized, especially if you're doing a video with lots of different footage sources. You can also use titles, archive footage and photography, and motion graphics to underline your points. I use these sparingly. That way, they're more impactful. We'll cover this stuff later on. I create a new timeline and bring the voiceover in. Then I go through the voiceover and cut out the takes I want to include, deleting everything else. Now, on a wide view of the timeline, you can see I have a load of small voice clips. I bring them together and play back the timeline. It sounds terrible. Everything's too close together. So I go through and space out the clips, making sure to give them enough space. You can do this the way I am, by selecting all the clips in front of the playhead and pushing them forward, or you can skip bringing the clips together and pull them into place one by one. It's just a preference, and you'll find what you're comfortable with. There's no hard and fast rule about how much space to have between your clips. It's best to listen through and see how it sounds. You might want a longer pause after an important point. You might want small pauses for a quick list. It all depends on context. You should now have a rough timeline of the voiceover. It's time to add in your clips. If you kept detailed notes during the viewing process, you will likely have specific clips, scenes, and shots in mind for certain sections of your voiceover. That'll make this a lot quicker. The easiest way to do this in my application, Premiere, is to select the film footage, scrub through to the right point or find it using the timecode, and then create in and out points on that footage. You can then drag just that clip, instead of the whole film, onto the timeline and do any finer edits there. Most editing applications have a function like this, although exactly how it works differs from app to app. As you bring in your essential clips, you'll probably need to shuffle your voiceover around a little. That's okay. Scenes always seem to be longer, shorter, or in a different order than I remember. Don't worry about mucking up your scripted voiceover order. This is just another part of creating the essay and finding the right flow for it. While you're doing this, you might find it helpful to mute the audio from the film. You can mute this whole channel to make this easier. Now that you've laid in your clips, you'll probably still have a lot of blank space on your timeline. These are sections where you didn't have a specific clip in mind, where it took you longer to voice your script out loud, or where you felt a bigger pause was needed for pacing. You might also be dealing with a more production-focused video essay. I always find these need additional sourcing for archive photography and footage, behind-the-scenes elements, and so on. Now you need to scrub through your available footage or go seek out new footage to fill in these gaps. When in doubt, I ask myself, what's the most direct, clear way I can explain this point visually? That's a great way to resolve problems when editing your video essay because it ties back to the central point of the whole exercise. This is a video essay after all, not an essay, and so wherever possible, you should explain things visually. There are limits to this. You may be tempted to use graphics and titles to point out elements of the film, like a certain shot framing or something similar. Where possible, I prefer to let things play out as closely as possible to how they're presented in the film, instead of, say, pausing, rewinding, and using little red circles to point out stuff. For me, it's about presenting the film as it can be seen by others, not manipulating it and not substituting in my own version. This also means that you encourage viewers to be critical, not just in evaluating the film, but also in evaluating your points about it. They might disagree, and that's part of the debate. Don't try to fix things in your favour. That's definitely not to say that titles, motion graphics, and other added elements aren't valuable. In lots of contexts, they can be very helpful for explanation. For a great example of how motion graphics and text elements can really underline critical points, it's worth checking out Mark Brown's video essay work on his channel Game Maker's Toolkit. He's dealing with a different medium and is very much aimed at being educational, so a little more explanation is required. But his graphic design and animation work is absolutely top-notch, so if you're interested in doing some of that, Follow his lead. From the film world, for my money, no one does motion graphics better than the Royal Ocean Film Society. For example, this video on the history of 3D film uses lots of explanatory graphics and text elements to really explore the technical and aesthetic approaches behind 3D in a way that wouldn't work as well with behind-the-scenes footage or clips from 3D films. At this point, you should have a nice full video timeline without any gaps, and your audio all laid out underneath. Well done, very cool. The last few things I do involve audio. Are you planning to have music in your video? I usually use some music, although not always the whole way through. Think carefully about how your music changes the tone of your video. Something too jazzy on an essay about grief in film, for example, could give entirely the wrong message. You might also choose to take some music from the soundtracks of the films that you're covering. Just remember that music comes with its own set of rights. You won't be able to monetize anything that's copyrighted, and you run the risk of the video being taken down. I usually use licensed music for this reason, where you're able to use the music under certain conditions, often just a simple credit at the end of the video. I've put a couple of my favorites in the description. Just remember to check the license conditions and make sure that you abide by them. The other thing to consider is how much sound you want to feature from the films themselves. Of course, I recommend that you include the sound from any actual scenes that you show. They might not make much sense otherwise. What I mean is, you might want to use some sound effects from the films that you're using. For me, this works better where no dialogue is playing. That way the voiceover can still be clearly understood, and that's easier with some films than others. In the slow, still films of Joanna Hogg or Hirokazu Koreeda, there's much more to hear without dialogue than in the hectic films of the Safdie brothers, for example. If you've laid out your video essay like this, with a muted channel for the movie, it should be relatively simple to drag the audio from the video clip to a new channel. That way the majority of your film audio remains muted, and you can selectively choose what to include in your video. Now that you have a finished version of your video, it's time to do a series of boring checks. Sit back and watch it again. Try listening to it through your speakers, and then again through your headphones. Can you hear everything that you need to hear? Does the video make sense? Do the cuts flow? Are the selected clips the right ones? Are the titles spelled correctly? If yes to all of those, now you can export the video. And then watch it again to make sure there aren't any errors in the export before you upload it. At this point, you're done. That's your video essay. Congratulations, I'm very proud of you. And that also means that this series of videos is done. You now know how to make a video essay. If you enjoyed these videos or learned something from them, do consider popping over to Patreon and supporting indietrix, my channel, or go to my Ko-fi and drop me a few quid to say thanks. No biggie if you don't. And if you have any questions about this stage of making a video essay, editing and finalizing, let me know in the comments below and I'll try to answer. Thanks for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing your video essays.